Today, in a visit of a snap bean field, we faced some deer tracks. So when we were following those tracks, we suddenly found also some deer drops. And here we have two specialists to talk a little bit about food safety on crop production.
So we've seen multiple signs of animal intrusion, the tracks that we noticed during our pre-harvest risk assessment, that the deer have already gotten into the crop and they've bit away at some of the leaves. And then we also have the deer droppings right here.
So what we need to do in this scenario is flag this area so that harvest crew doesn't come along or the contamination doesn't get an opportunity to spread. Now fortunately we've been pretty dry here recently, so there's probably less likelihood of getting splash contact or contamination spread. So in this instance what we can do is we can either establish just a buffer zone up to 25 feet where we're pretty confident that the contamination hasn't spread beyond that. Another option that we have, or that we can use along with that buffer zone, is we can remove it using some specialized equipment that we just use for removing fecal material from fields. So if we have a designated shovel or a designated scoop, we can scoop this up, remove it in a way that won't contaminate other produce in the field, and then make sure that we use our standard operating procedure to clean up that equipment before it is used again or is placed back in storage.
And then at the end of the day, we go to our pre-harvest risk assessment record. We write in that we did the pre-harvest risk assessment. We found some contamination, and our corrective action was that we removed it from the field.
So here we are in a cantaloupe field, and while we were just walking around, what do you see? Some coyote feces. And our two food safety specialists are here to give some instructions how to deal with that.
So as with the deer scat in the snap bean field, what we're going to do is mark that this is here. Your workers need to be trained not to harvest any produce that will be contacting this. So this piece right here needs to be discarded or not harvested. It can be left in the field. You will also need to determine the likelihood of contamination from this spreading to surrounding plants and establish a buffer zone. So again, that maximum of 25 feet buffer zone, you need to figure out the likelihood for splash, for wind contamination if these plants are moving around, and just figure out how large that buffer needs to be. Now, we get the question a lot on why do we need to discard this if it's going to be washed in a sanitizer? So a lot of times these melons are washed in chlorine or peroxyacetic acid. Really what that's doing is that's just keeping contamination from spreading from melon to melon within that wash tank. Chlorine really is ineffective at removing any bacteria that would come from this feces onto the plant or onto the melon. It's really ineffective in actually removing that. So we can't wash away contamination once it's already on the plant.
And you might say to yourself, well, why can't I just slice it in half and sell the non-poop side at the farmer's market? But the risk of contamination is still too high, and your customers don't want to know that you did that. So after you've trained your employees, you've done your pre-harvest risk assessment, you've removed the contamination and the product, at the very end, you would document it in your pre-harvest risk assessment.
So we've seen some instances of intrusion from deer and coyotes, and here in this watermelon field we have a watermelon that has bird feces on it. So workers need to be trained never to harvest any produce that has fecal contamination on it. And again, you'll need to figure out what the risk of the spreading is and determine your buffer zone that you won't harvest around this contaminated melon.
And if you do remove this watermelon from the field, before you do your records, you're going to want to wash your hands for 20 seconds to make sure that there's no risk of cross-contamination.